Hello, I'm looking for someone to join me in an adventure. So last week on Middle-earth March was a bit of a bust. I was way too busy with other projects to get anything done. And my planned wizard week is now going to be week 3. So today I'll be painting one of the 3 wizards, and the wizard in question is going to be Radagast the Brown. So he's not the most powerfulest of wizards, but he does have an affinity with nature, and this is emphasized in his color palette. He uses, as his name suggests, a lot of browns and a few greys here and there, and flesh tones as well. He also has a pet raven, which helps him observe the battlefield with a bird's eye view, so we'll be painting some blacks as well. As for my second video of this week, I'll hopefully be painting Saruman the White from the classic White Council box. So he's going to be a bit of a challenge, as painting white in general isn't an easy task. Some people, like myself, it comes natural to, but others do struggle with it. The good thing about Saruman is his robes aren't actually a pure white, they're actually a dusty bone colour. So we'll be utilising some various shades of bone in that. But for today's focus, let's head into Mirkwood and find Radagast's home and paint Radagast the Brown. So here we have the classic metal Radagast the Brown from the old Battle Games in Middle-earth series. So this is the original sort of interpretation of Radagast the Brown, and yeah, he looks kind of like Gandalf, but in different colours. I guess that's what they used to reference him, but a far cry from the Sylvester McCoy portrayal in The Hobbit, which, yeah, he is a nice model, but I have a soft spot for this guy. So we are going to be doing several different colours of brown for this, as well, that is his name. So first we're going to start with Baylor Brown. This is going to be for his undertunic. So this is a layer paint, but we're using it to base coat with, as it's a nice mid-tone sort of brown that will help later on when it comes to layering up other colours. So the areas we're talking about is his under tunic here, so he's sort of under robe. We've got his sleeves. And we got the larger part down here. So the Baylor Brown down, we've got our first colour. Next up then we're going to paint his actual tunic, which is going to be Cajun flesh. So it's a nice, rich, sort of muddy chocolate brown, and will be perfect for the almost leather sort of appearance that the tunic has. Though it's more clothy, I would have thought. Wizards very rarely wear leathers, except for belts and stuff. And especially for Radagast, as he does have a fondness for nature. So wearing things that are natural are more his style. So we got the sleeve here of the tunic, and of course the main body as well. There we go. Well, that's his tunic picked out with our second brown. Now on to our third brown. This is going to be for his cloak, his glove, and his boots. And we're going to use a nice coloured Mornfang brown. So this is a lovely colour. It's a sort of a lighter chocolate, more milk chocolate. But it's a lovely warm brown, perfect for the main colour on our model. So we'll flip to the back because it's the easiest to cover. So we want to paint all over his robe, including his hood here. And then the other areas we want to pick out are his falconer's glove here. And of course, his boots. There we go. Now all our browns are dry. We can hit them with a wash. So sticking with the brown theme, we're going to use Radagast Earthshade for a nice dark wash to get into those recesses. So load up a small puddle on our palette. And then we can apply this straight to the model. So all over the brown we've just done. Working it into all those recesses. Don't worry about being neat at this point. We've got other areas we're going to be covering over later anyway. There we go, our shade's dried, but it's darkened everything down a little too much. So we're going to start layering back up some of our base colours. But first off, we're going to make a mix. So we're going to use 50-50% Baylor Brown and Carrick Stone. And we're going to use this mix to relayer up the under tunic. So being careful around those recesses that we've just done and shaded. I'm going to relayer up in this lighter colour before we come in with pure Carrick Stone for a final highlight. So there we go, that's our Baylor Brown and Carrick Stone mix relayered. Now we can go in with pure Carrick Stone for a fine edge highlight. So you want to get the sharpest folds in the cloak. Just angle the model to get the best out of your edges. There we go. It's subtle, but it's a nice edge highlight. Now we can go back to relayering the rest of our browns. So for the rest of the colours, we're going to go back to our base colour first, and then we can work on our highlight afterwards. So for his tunic, back to Carthaginian Flesh to layer up the base colour, leaving, of course, that recess nicely shaded. So onto our model, get all of those exposed areas, of course, leaving those recesses shaded. So there we go. Moving on next to our relayer of his outer cloak with Mornfang Brown. And then we can move on to our highlights. So on our outer cloak, we're just looking for these larger raised folds, avoiding that recess. So there we go, that's the Mornfang brown layered up again, and it's really bringing out the colours on Radagast. But the tunic still looks a little on the dark side, so we're going to go in with Goreful brown. This is just for a small layer. We don't want to cover the entire area, just the areas where the light's catching the most. So we won't need a very big amount of this, so get a small amount ready on the palette. And then onto our model. So pick out areas here where the light's catching. Down here as well. This fold and the flatter areas. There we go, and our final highlight is Dawnstone. This is an odd choice, but it's kind of how the original model was highlighted, and that's what I'm trying to go for. So we don't want a lot of this, we're just going to get the sharper folds for a fine edge highlight. So go in on the tunic here, getting those sharp edges. And there we go. As I said, odd choice, but I think it works. So now we're going to layer up the cloak. And for our cloak, we're going to use Night Quest or Flesh. Again, this is another odd choice. It's a bit of a strange jump, but I tested it out and it works quite well. So again, we're just going to go for the higher points on the folds. But once we got enough of this ready on our palette and loaded up our brush, I'm going to start highlighting all the cloak. So get the edge here. Using the side of the brush where we can, we get all the edges. And there we go, that's all the brown cloth details done on Radagast, and as you can see, it's looking quite good, but we've got a lot of details left to pick out. So next we're going to work on his face and his hand. So we're going to need some flesh tones, and for his hair, we're going to need some greys. So we'll work from the inside out, so we're going to do the face first. And as we've got a nice starting position with Xandri Dust, we're going to go straight to Cadian Flesh Tone. Good thing about the light undercolor, we can go straight into a layer paint. So onto our model, picking out all the exposed skin. Got his ear behind his ponytail there. And we got his bottom lip. And don't forget to get his right hand. Around his staff of power. So we will need a couple of layers as we have a fairly thin paint here. So let the first coat dry and come in with a second. So now that the Cadian flesh tone has dried, we're going to give it a nice shade. And we're going to use Caribou Crimson, as the example model I'm referencing has a nice rich red pink undertone. So we'll just get a little bit of Caribou Crimson and I want a little bit of water just to thin it out so it's not too strong. And then onto Radagast. So letting this work its way into all the recesses of the flesh. Due to the thinness of the shade, it's dried pretty quick. So we're going to go back to Cadian Flesh Tone, and this time we're just going to focus this application on the more raised areas of skin. So his brow, cheek, nose, and of course his fingers here on his hand. And there we go. Next we're going to do a fine highlight with Kislev flesh. And this is just to pick out the very extreme edges of our flesh. So high points like cheekbones, the nose, and the knuckles on his fingers. So pick out very tip of his nose, top of his brow, top of his cheek, and across his knuckles as well. So the base coat Radagast's hair, we're going to come back to Dawnstone. There's a nice mid-grey that we can use to build up lighter colours on top of. So thin this out quite a bit just so it flows into those recesses. And then we can apply it to his hair. So we've got his beard to pick out. This is quite a messy, scraggly beard. Got his bit of a ponytail coming down here. And of course around the back we got his hair. Oh, we've also got Dawnstone. We'll pick out the top of his staff of power. So we can hit this all at the same time with the same colours. There we go, with that Dawnstone applied, our face is looking a little more complete. So next we're going to shade down all our grey that we've just painted with some Nuln Oil. This will help add depth. So we want to make sure we're using a brush we got control with. So I'm sticking to the same brush I'm using throughout this video. And then we can apply this, getting the shade into all those recesses. And don't forget to get the stone at the top of his staff as well. There we go, Radagast's hair is now nicely shaded. So we're going to go on to our first highlight colour, and this is Administratum Grey. So again, we're going to need to be very careful with this, so making sure we've got our paint nicely thinned and we haven't got too much on our brush. Because now we need to painstakingly pick out the strands of hair. And we'll pick out the edges on our stone as well. And finally then, for the hair, we're going to want a little bit of white scarf. This is just going to be picking out the very fine edges of the hairs. So we'll pick out sort of the upward facing bits. There we go, that's the hair finished. So now we can move on to our final details across the model. So Radagast has come along nicely, but we've still got quite a few details left to do. And the first thing to do is to come back to Radagast, and we want to pick out all of the different leaves around the model. Most of these should still be Radagast, but any that we've made any spillage on, we'll just relayer with this colour. So we got some hanging on his belt here, some at the bottom of his pouch here, and the majority of them are on top of his staff. Now that the Radagast has dried, we're going to come in with Warp Lightning and we'll hit those leaves with this as a nice one coat solution. It'll get the recesses and the highlights all in one go. Just love contrast paint so much. Does a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to painting, especially small details such as the leaves and vines on Radagast here. And there we go, that's the green details done, and it really adds a nice pop of colour to a otherwise pretty brown and grey model. But we're not done yet. So moving on to our next detail, we're going to pick out all the black leather, which is just his belt and his little pouch, and we're going to use Abaddon Black for this, followed by a highlight of Dawnstone. So we got his belt just around his waist here. And we got his little pouch. And we'll get the handle of his dagger. There we go. And Once that's dry, we're going to go in with our Dawnstone for just a fine edge highlight. And we'll pick out just the edge of his pouch. And we'll get the raised areas of his dagger and belt. That's that done. Moving on to our next colour, we're going to start looking at painting his raven. As you can see, I've already picked out some of the details with Avedon Black, but we've got quite a lot more to pick out. So our first colour is going to be Corvus Black, which, well, it's perfect for ravens. The name is there. So this is a nice dusky grey rather than an actual black. And it's perfect for a base for the raven. So got his tail feathers down here, and then the rest of his body. Now that the Corvus Black is dry, we can go in with our first colour, and we're going to be using 2 dry brushes. First off, we're going to use Mechanica Standard Grey. So get some of this worked into our dry brush. And then we can dry brush the raven. And now we're going to do the same, but with Dawnstone, but on a much more reduced area, focusing more on the head and tops of the wings. So just picking out the top here. If it looks too grey, we can hit it with a bit of Nuln Oil just to darken it down again. But there we go. I think our raven's pretty good. So we just have 2 areas left to pick out. So we've got the staff and we've got the blade on his knife. So we'll focus on the staff first. And the first colour is going to be dried bark, so a nice brown colour. That's perfect for the wood. And then we'll highlight that with a little bit of Baneblade brown. So we get some of this prepared on our palette. And then we'll pick out the staff of his Staff of Power. Being careful around those areas we finished, like his fingers. And of course, all of his robes. And once that's dry, we're going to pick out a highlight of Baneblade Brown. So just going to try and get some nice thin lines. So you can draw some nice thin lines down the staff, symbolizing wood grain. And there's our staff complete. All that's left to do then is get a tiny bit of lead belcher and we'll paint the blade on his knife. There we go. All that's left to do now is add the base detail. And so onto our base detail then, we're going to start things off with a layer of sterling mud. This will give a nice dark earth base to our model, perfect for fighting in the darkness of Mirkwood. So just want a small amount, not too much, as we don't want to apply a too thick a layer. So gently using the small end of our texture tool, we'll spread the paint around. With the sterling mud dry, we're going to darken it down a little bit extra with a quick shade of our Grex Earth shade. So just apply this gently over the base, helping to dark down and define the grit in the texture paste. Leave that to dry, and we just got two colours after that to apply. And next up, we want to dry brush the base with a bit of Radagast flesh. So get some onto a nice round dry brush, work it into the bristles as usual. Try to get as much off as we can. And then onto our model, we want to drag it across, picking out that raised detail. So our final colour requires him off the paint handle, and we're going to use Morn Van Brown to paint the base rim. So being very careful, get some of this on our brush, and then apply it around the edge of our base rim. As an optional extra step, let's add a little bit of interest to the base. So I've got some grass tufts here. I've cut one in half, so I can put half on the front there, and the other half on the back. So there we go, Radagast is finished, and he's ready to join Gandalf and Saruman as they face off against the Necromancer for the fate of Mirkwood, and indeed larger Middle-earth. So I hope you found this tutorial useful, and I hope you get around to painting your own Radagast. You can easily apply these colours to the newer Radagast model if you have that in your collection. But like I said at the start, I really do have a soft spot for this classic metal model. But there we have it. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you found this Middle-earth March video useful. Let me know what other Middle-earth models you want me to paint in the future. And all that's left for me to do is say thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on more Middle-earth March. Goodbye.